So you hear about a massive data breach at a huge company like Odido, the Dutch telecom giant, and you just have to wonder, this wasn't just some random hack. Odido is a big deal, and you'd expect them to have top-notch security, right? I mean, they've probably got all the certifications hanging on the wall. So how on earth does a company like that still get hit with such a devastating attack?
And that's the big question we're going to dig into right now. We're going to uncover that massive gap between having a fancy security certificate and actually being secure. So first things first, let's break down how this whole thing even happened.
All right, so let's get into the attack itself. It's super important to figure out what we actually know for a fact. And then, what's the most likely story for how these attackers got inside?
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, you've got to separate what's confirmed from what's just theory. Here's what Odido officially said. Yep, criminals got into a customer system, and yep, they downloaded data. That's the hard fact. But the media started reporting how they pulled it off. And the story that emerged involves phishing emails and even phone calls to trick employees. It sounds pretty plausible, so let's run with that as our working theory for now.
And the stuff they stole? Wow. This was the really sensitive stuff. We're talking full names, addresses, bank account numbers, even your ID details. But the real kicker? Later, it came out that they also grabbed sensitive customer service notes. You know, the notes about personal situations, payment plans, things you tell them in confidence. For a criminal, getting all that data in one package, it's an absolute goldmine.
You know, this whole thing went down incredibly fast, really just over a couple of weeks. The first red flags popped up around February 7th. By the 12th, Odido had to go public. But here's where it gets worse. Watch this escalation. On the 25th, Odido comes out and says, actually, they took more data than we thought. And literally the very next day, the hackers start leaking that stolen data online.
So if we follow what the media reported, here's probably how the attack went down, step by step. It kicks off with a classic phishing email, right? Just trying to snag an employee's password. But then they follow up with a phone call. That's what we call vishing. And they pretend to be from the IT help desk. This is where the social engineering, the art of pure manipulation, comes in. They talk the employee into approving some kind of security pop-up, and boom. Just like that, the attacker is in. They've got access to the customer system, and they start hoovering up data.
Okay, so that's the how. Now let's get to the real head-scratcher. A company the size of Odido almost certainly has an ISO 27001 certification. That's like the gold standard for information security. So if they have that, how in the world does an attack like this still happen?
So what even is this ISO 27001 thing? It's really important to get this right. It's not some magic shield that makes a company hack-proof. Not at all. It's more like a rulebook, a management system. It's a framework that helps a company map out its risks, put controls in place to manage them, and then keep getting better. So think of it as a continuous process, not a one-time fix.
Probably the best way to think about it is like a driver's license, right? Getting your license just proves you passed the test. You know the rules. But it doesn't stop you from getting into an accident if you're texting and driving or just not paying attention. The license itself can't prevent a crash.
So if we put on our ISO 27001 glasses and look at this breach, we can start to see where the cracks were. The standard has a big section on planning and assessing your risks. Well, it kind of seems like the risk of someone tricking a customer service employee was, maybe not taken seriously enough. And then you've got the support part of the standard, which is all about training and awareness. Clearly, that's where things really fell apart. The human element was the weak link. An employee got fooled, and that tells you right there that the training they had just wasn't cutting it for this kind of modern attack.
But hold on, it wasn't just a human mistake. Even if an attacker gets past one person, your technical defenses are supposed to kick in and contain the damage. The ISO standard talks about operation, and here, it looks like there was no real control to stop someone from just downloading tons of data all at once, like no alarm bells for scraping. And then there's performance evaluation, which is basically monitoring. The systems just didn't see this massive data heist happening in real time. So, and this is the really important part, it wasn't one thing that failed. It was multiple layers of defense, both human and technical, that crumbled.
Okay, so we've talked about the company's problems, but let's shift gears. What does this actually mean for the customers? For the people whose personal information is now just out there? What are the real risks?
Yeah, let's really make this personal for a second. Imagine it's your data, your full name, your home address, your bank details, your ID number, all of it, leaked in one big bundle. What can a bad guy actually do with all that?
Well, with that kind of data, criminals basically have a complete toolkit for fraud. They can send you phishing emails that are scarily convincing because they know all your details. They can try to commit identity fraud,
opening up credit cards or loans in your name. They could even try a SIM swap attack, where they trick your phone company into giving them control of your phone number so they can steal your two-factor codes. And in the absolute worst-case scenarios, they can use this info to try and extort you directly.
Look, this was a total disaster, no doubt about it. But you've got to learn from these things. So what are the big lessons here? How do we go from just having security on paper to having security that actually works in the real world?
All right, let's talk solutions. Here are the top 3 things that, if they were in place, could have made a huge difference. Number 1, identity and access. You need multi-factor authentication that is genuinely resistant to phishing. We'll circle back to that in a sec. Number 2, customer support. You have to toughen up your processes. Simple things, like a hard rule against approving security stuff over the phone, or always calling a customer back on their known number. Super critical. And number 3, monitoring. You need systems that can automatically spot and shut down someone trying to scrape massive amounts of data.
Okay, if you remember only one technical thing from this whole explainer, make it this: phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Things like FIDO2 or passkeys. These technologies make that social engineering trick we talked about almost impossible to pull off. Why? Because your login is physically tied to something you own, like your phone or a little USB key. A hacker on the phone can't get that, so even if they steal your password, it's totally useless without your device.
So, what's the bottom line here? The Odido breach is the perfect and painful example that a certificate hanging on the wall just isn't enough. Real security? That's about culture. It's about creating an environment where a customer service agent feels totally confident saying no to a weird phone call. And it's about having the tech in place so that one human error doesn't cascade into a catastrophic data breach. That is the difference between just being certified and actually being secure.